Welcome in to the FireZone Show. Good to be back. Taking a little time off since the end of the season, rest, recharge. But thought we wanted to jump back in here with a pretty interesting topic and a great guest. I don't like to throw that word around loosely, that adjective great, but I think that's fitting for the guest that we have tonight. Before I introduce him, let me touch base with Dennard as I always do. We want to set the stage to give a proper introduction. Dennard, it's been a while since two of us have talked. How you doing, man?
I am doing good. How are you doing, sir?
Living the dream, like I told you before, living the dream.
Or the dream living you, whatever way.
No, living the dream. Things are going well. Family's good. Everybody's doing well. You know, kids looking forward to summer. Last day of school for them is tomorrow. It's half day, so they're excited about summer beginning. So everything's good.
Yeah, man, we full swing camp season over here.
Yeah.
He's in his first camp week this week, and then I think the youngest starts her fun next week. So we're in rotation right now.
I know it will. I know it will.
At least one's gonna be gone, you know.
Yeah, we got a 15-year-old. He's aged out of the camp stuff, so he's actually applying for jobs. So that's making me feel old. But anyway, without any further ado, let me introduce our guest. Really, if you are a fan of the Ravens and you're on social media, you're on Twitter, you're on YouTube, you're online, if you go to the games, I almost feel like no introduction is necessary, but I will do it anyway. We're joined by the one and only Ken McCusick. You know him as at Film Study Ravens on Twitter. You know him from his Film Study podcast. You know him from the Film Study Baltimore website. You can hear him on 105.7 The Fan. I know I first encountered Ken's work through his offensive line scoring, a few years back. And that really kind of, piqued my interest. And I started reading that column, that article regularly and some of the other work that Ken did, and have been following him ever since, and been fortunate enough to be on his show a couple times. So Ken, I'm setting you up like a lifetime achievement award. How are you doing, man?
more than a few times for you on my show, my friend, and you're one of my favorite people to talk football with. Appreciate being here. Dennard, we've only had a couple shows together so far, but always been a good time, and let's we're gonna hear for a heated debate today, I hear.
Nah, nothing heated. A mature conversation that a lot of individuals want to kind of flush out and kind of hear the idea of why that green dot needs to be where it needs to be. And, that's different interpretations from different people. So I think that's a great way to kind of have a great conversation with someone who understands what it takes to make those communications and those reach outs and those checks in the defense, and who needs to make those calls.
Yeah, and the timeliness of it. I mean, I guess before we get into it, I just wanted to touch on that timeliness part. Is it probably, I don't know what, over the last couple of years, I guess you probably have to go back to 2018, maybe 2019, probably 2019, for a time where you thought it was maybe in question. I don't know that it's in question, but there's at least some narrative out there, some discussion out there that maybe there's some debate about who has it, who wears it. I don't think it's even been up for debate since that time. Certainly not in 2020 and 2021. I still don't think it is this year either. But anyway, there is a little bit of that out there. And so I think that's another factor with this, just the timing of. But before we jump into it, I did want to allow you both, and I kind of wanted to add my piece to this too, just because it happened yesterday, June 22nd. We're recording on Thursday, June 23rd. The very, very sad passing of Jalen Ferguson and Tony Siragusa, both in the same day, both young men, in the grand scheme of things, and unexpected. We saw the news about Jalen Ferguson pretty early Wednesday morning, and then later that evening, early evening, we saw the news about Tony Siragusa, and just really sad, really tragic. I think it was a lot of people expressing, their emotions yesterday on Twitter, on social media, family, friends, teammates, fans. And I'll start with you, Ken, because I know you were at an event not long ago that Tony Siragusa was at. So just, any thoughts you wanted to share about those two tragic and untimely passings.
I mean, we'll start with Goose because you brought him up first. At the Super Bowl 35 event, he was there and he was in full form. It's a month ago. Literally, I think it was May 21st, 22nd in there. But he was taking jabs with Shannon Sharp, but trading jabs, I should say, and telling stories. And he and Sharp were kind of the stars of the events, even though Ray Lewis and Marvin Lewis and Billick and all those guys were there. Those two guys definitely did a lot of the talking and seemed healthy, seemed like everything is fine. And then all of a sudden he's gone. And, you realize I'm 4 years older than Tony was. And, it really brings your own mortality into question. And how much I'd like to take care of myself more than I do, as I go through. But Goose, a lot of ways lived a very full life and his funeral will probably be a celebration of that. Certain age, certain number of accomplishments. It's a celebration as opposed to a tragic thing. Very much the opposite, obviously, with Jalen. He's taken much too young from us, and it's beyond sad in terms of what's happening, the family's life behind, and everything. And I can't even imagine the family's feelings over this.
Now,
yeah, I would second that when it comes with Jalen. I think that one hit me close because I played college football and I understand even if you make it to the pros, you're part of that 1%. And that transition was hard for me. I mean, trying to go from playing sports since you were 7 and then come to a full stop at 22, 23 years old and say, oh, go find your life. Go do something else. And, seeing him and knowing how big a year this was for him and, to see how it kind of was unfolding, how he came to camp and he looked like he was a different guy and he was and just to see that happen to him is like Ken said, it really is you right to the forefront of the present and really makes you think. And then, Siragusa, I was, that team was really the first team I really fell in love with in Baltimore, even through the 5 games of no touchdowns. And you felt like you were in good hands with Goose and Ray and Bullware and all those guys. And I was reading a story earlier about how Goose had lost his dad his dad passed away at 48. And in a sense, that changed his mindset to the fact that, not every day is counted. Not every day is promised. And go 100 miles an hour every day. And if you wake up the next day, go 100 miles an hour again. So I feel for both of the families, but that is definitely a wake-up call for me.
Yeah, the Jalen Ferguson one, like you said, it's devastating to think about those young children, those 3 kids, and you saw and could feel the pain and the anguish right through the tweets from the mother of his children and things that she was expressing. And it's not about trying to make comparisons. Obviously, both situations are tragic and sad, and both families are grieving the loss of these guys. So one thing, like you said, Ken, about Siragusa, I certainly could see his funeral being kind of that celebratory kind of approach because Dennard mentioned it about his experience with his dad passing and not wanting to kind of live with regret or like he left anything undone or unsaid or unexpressed, and he certainly didn't live that way. I mean, he didn't leave anything from a personality standpoint to question, what you saw is what you got. And everybody who commented about him, all the teammates, all the friends, just how much he loved life and similar things you heard about Jalen Ferguson, just always with a big smile on his face, always in a good mood. So yeah, both are very sad. It was a really tough day. Obviously, it's just one day removed, and these families are going to be impacted for the rest of their lives. But we just send our prayers and thoughts out to them and wish them the best, and understand that they're going through a tough time. And I just didn't want to move into this topic without acknowledging that and kind of paying our respects and whatever brief way that we can. So with that, it's a tough, never an easy transition to move from stuff like that. But we do have an interesting topic that really kind of originated, I think, when you had Dennard on your show to talk about a couple of players. One of them happened to be Jalen Ferguson, ironically enough. But about the green dot, that human communication on defense, and kind of some different ways of looking at that versus, from I think, we know that Chuck Clark has worn that last couple of seasons. And you guys kind of got into a little bit of a debate about it. There was from a position group sort of perspective, whether it's a secondary player or whether it's a front seven player, typically a linebacker. We're not talking about defensive linemen or anything like that. And kind of the pros and cons. And I listened to that and I was like, man, this is great. I wish we had more of that. And then Ken, you mentioned it like, hey, this probably should be a separate show. It's the kind of topic that lends itself to some real, it's got some depth. There's some real depth to it. So as we do here, we like to be, courteous guests and allow folks that we have on to start first on this kind of thing. So Ken, I'll turn it over to you. And I think I know which side of this you feel more comfortable with, but I'll let you speak to it for yourself.
Let's go through the history real quickly with the Baltimore Ravens of who's had the dot. So Eric Turner in 1996 had the dot, even though Ray Lewis was on the team. Ray didn't take it until the first game in 97. And then he got it. Held that essentially for his entire career through 2012. Now, he missed some games. Josh Bynes had it for a couple games in 2012. McClain and some other guys had it who were inside linebackers during that time. One really unknown is that Jim Leonard had it for the 2008 playoff run for 3 games. But that's a little hidden thing in Ravens history. I never knew the reason. Harbaugh's still around. We could ask him why.
What year is that?
2008 in the playoff run. So I got pictures of it.
I'm trying. You're saying it out loud. I'm trying to. And why that might have happened. Was there an injury?
I don't know. Ray was active, but Leonard had probably at the time the second greatest ever defensive postseason by a Ravens player, only behind Lewis 2000. So it's amazing that actually happened, and the green dot was in that position. But it was a strange circumstance. Never heard the reasons. It's something I've always meant to ask Harbaugh about it at some event, and I think the opportunity's never really come up, or I've never remembered it when I've had the opportunity.
There's definitely a story behind that. That's got to be.
Good Rex Ryan question too. Anyway, yes. 2013 they got the Jaguars. Daryl Smith took the green dot. Mosley took it over in 2014 in his 6th game, so he didn't get it right away, but he got it almost right away. He held it until he left in 2017. In 2018, there was the great plan to give it over to Owasso. Actually, 2019. Sorry, Mosley had it through 18. The great plan to give it over to Owasso that didn't work out. Of course, Owasso wasn't really ready to be a 3-down Mike, which is one of the issues you have. Is your inside linebacker has to be on the field for all the plays if you want him to have the green dot. Whoever does. Then they reversed that. They went to Weddle after a half of that Cincinnati game with Owasso having it, and Weddle held it until the 4th game, and then Jefferson got it. And Clark took it over the next game after Jefferson got hurt, and he has yet to relinquish it in the time since. So that's the history of the Ravens. So it's always been, one time it's been a free safety, actually twice. I guess Turner was a free safety as well. A couple times it's been a strong safety with Clark, Jefferson, and also with that brief 3-game stint of Jim Leonard. The rest of the time it's always been the Mike linebacker.
And those Mike linebackers, those two you mentioned, boy, they held it down for a while.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that also has to lend a little bit to the fact of what type of defense they were playing, especially in that early, and then shifting to a 3-4 with Ray Lewis. So the dot really wouldn't have moved to that point. And then draft history basically was like, well, we need to find the next Ray Lewis, so we're going to give the dot to that person. And it kind of seemed like it at that point, once Weddle got it, and that the emphasis on linebacker play kind of changed in Baltimore because Owasu was whole. Young should have never been drafted. Not on this team, at least. So that whole mess inside, you had to go with Mr. Reliable and Mr. Consistent. So you had to go to Chuck Clark. And I mean, that's how it should have went. But now I've always felt like it should be in the middle linebacker role or someone who's going to be on the field connecting to the front seven.
I mean, I have that same bias as you, Dennard, even though I'd say personnel-wise, there are no other choices on the current roster. There's no inside linebacker that they even want on the field for 3 downs. With Mosley and Ray, they had the luxury of that for many years.
Yes.
It is more common that a team has a strong safety they want on the field every play than that they have a Mike linebacker they want on the field every play, because those 3-down unicorns are becoming scarcer and scarcer in the NFL. It's more of a passing league. You want more replacement with either different linebackers or safeties at your ILB spots on 3rd down, on obvious passing downs at the end of the half, important times like that. So I think there's more of a tendency now to have it be a strong safety. But given the druthers, I mean, hey, if I've got a 3-down inside linebacker, Mike linebacker, who's going to be on the field for every play of the year, he's the guy for sure.
I think if they had gotten Wagner, I think that's where the dot would have landed. And I think that would have been a perfect compliment.
This is a pretty short debate.
So I guess my question is, if we're looking at the safeties, we're looking at the personnel that the Ravens, who would have the dot this year? Because I can see scenarios that Chuck Clark wouldn't be on the field.
My own personal opinion, I think Chuck will play every play this year. I think that Hamilton will have a more specialized role where he comes in to do specialized things. And that may be in a lot of different places. And I think you actually have more flexibility to move him around if you do it on a 70 or 60% of snaps basis. The Ravens can do a lot of adjustment in terms of increasing the number of 360 plays. Part of it, big nickel against every 12 personnel package. I think we'll start to see that this year. I think we'll see a lot more dime and a lot more quarter. And if the offense does their job this year, and that'll be one of the really fun things, the Ravens have some leads to defend. This is going to be a freaking fun team to watch play a lot of 6 and 7 DB packages in the second half with the 2 touchdown lead set.
And this, Mike and I have had this conversation before. When the Ravens offense was rolling back in 2019, 2020, before we started doing this show, but it was when this team decided to become an offensive team, you have to build a defense that's complementary. And Harbaugh has always said he wanted to be aggressive on offense. We need to be aggressive. Well, you can't be aggressive on defense if you're aggressive on offense. Because if you're aggressive on defense and you're trying to be aggressive on offense, guess what I'm going to do as a defensive coordinator? I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to make you go 80 yards, and then my offense is going to take advantage of defense. So it's almost like you have to mirror, you have to be polar opposites in a sense when you're offense and defense. If you're going to be an aggressive offense, you got to be able to, as a defense, be on the field. Maybe if you're up for, like you said, a couple of scores, or you get quick scores, your defense is going to be on the field for 30-plus minutes. Now, can you do that in a wing style defense? No, because the calls start looking stale. They start looking like the same thing. You're just rotating them. That's the beautiful part, I feel, of Mike Macdonald coming in. Zone is always going to be different depending on the route combinations. So every play is going to be different because if the receiver, number 2 receiver runs an out and the out on a dig, the reaction is going to be different than a fly route and a corner route or a post route and an under route. So you have to prepare yourself defensively to play with a team that the Ravens are trying to put together.
I think that's a very valid point. And it's oftentimes the linkage between pass rush and play of the secondary is pointed to. Sometimes people don't even really understand that linkage is what it is. It's very, very significant. But maybe even more significant, but certainly in the same ballpark, is the linkage between how well your offense is playing and how easy that makes it to play defense, period. And when I go look back at the 2019 season, one of the things I saw is they played only 10.6% base defense snaps. They played 13.2% race car snaps, as I call them, with 4 outside linebackers. That is unbelievably different in terms of how you're able to play defense. And that's what I'm looking forward to from this year's team. It is a team that can really take advantage of an offense that's good again. I hope I'm right about that. I hope the offense really is good again. It's always we talk about it. We run the risk of injuries. We don't know who Ronnie Stanley is going to be this year. I think that's central to it. But
Yeah.
But if the Ravens are good again offensively, if they're like somewhere between 19 and 20, I think this defense is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and they're going to generate a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to the point of the green dot conversation is with this type of defense that I feel like Mike Macdonald's bringing in. There's going to be need, and let me back up, because the way it seems like from everything we've kind of heard from the players and how installation is going and how everyone is now understanding what the totality of the defense and what Mike is thinking on a regular basis. I think that's very important as a defensive coordinator with your team as a brand new guy, or even the beginning of the year with installation and everything, is everyone understanding the foundation of the defense. I think that was lacking the last few years. And Mike said this to me, Wink kind of turned into a one-trick pony in a sense. And I totally agree with that statement. I think when Mike came in and these guys and Humphrey comes out and says, yeah, we're looking at coverages and blocks. So we're looking at man-free coverages. We're looking at cover 2 type coverages, split safeties. We're looking at, cover 3 coverages. So now the secondary knows what the linebackers are doing in every coverage. So now when you come out of the huddle and you're communicating, now the and the linebackers can look at the front and everybody's on the same page. We know what our call is. We know what possible checks we're going to go to. Everybody's brain is working, and that's what you want. I think that's very important.
I agree with that statement. I think laying that on Wink might not be the correct place to lay the blame for that, because what I saw the last 3 years here in Baltimore, so the last 2 years really tremendously. I'm sorry, what'd you say, Mike?
I say it was a good trick. When he and I talked about it earlier today, and I landed on that. It's funny. I landed on that one trick pony thing. I found myself. It was weird because I was like, man, I think I'm kind of known as a little bit of a Greg Roman apologist. I said, now I may be becoming a Wink Martindale apologist, because I was like, you know what? When I say one trick, obviously we knew that Wink, like pressure and bringing pressure in different ways, whether that's numbers, whether that's deception, whether it's combination, it was in his coaching DNA. It was his coaching philosophy. He believed in bringing pressure, right? That's just what he was going to do. And I think when he wasn't in a situation where, in his own words, he had DoorDash corners, it worked well. But then when he did, it didn't work as well. Because like you can, and I'll let you go back. I didn't mean to interrupt. You look at those previous 3 years. I mean, they were top 10 in points allowed. One season, I think top 2. I think they were second. I think another season they were either top 5, and one season they were 7th. So, I mean, the trick worked pretty well when he had the guys to pull it off. And then when he didn't, it didn't work as well. But then what I didn't think about until you guys just mentioned it a few moments ago was how the offense played in those years and how well the offense played, how that might have also helped.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a big feeling that's the case. I want to go back to the point that was made that basically the defense is learning in blocks. And I've heard the same things said by McDonald, that basically, or said by the other players, I guess it is, that we're learning why we're doing these things and why this will work as a whole. That's fantastic. I'm all for it. I still think that will get through to a Humphrey. That will get through to a Clark. That will get through to a Marcus Williams. No problem. Probably Kyle Hamilton. No problem. I still wonder whether or not it's really going to get through in the way it needs to get through to the inside linebackers, because their big problem these last couple of years has been no one knows what's going on between level 2 and 3. It's like somebody turns invisible as soon as they cross behind them. They've got not the good understanding of the route concepts that may be coming off the line of scrimmage, which is something we saw just done tremendously well from Ray and from Mosley. And I think that Josh Bynes actually has some of that. LG Fort had some of that. Those guys are limited in ways. All 4 of them are limited in some ways of coverage, but they're better coverage players than the current guys because they just had an understanding of what was going on. They could get in the lane even when their physical gifts were completely lost. We saw Ray do a lot of that in his last couple of years in the league, really making do with what he could still do physically in terms of being a bothersome force in the passing lane still. So it's easy to blame this on Wink, partly because he's departed. Wink, to me, one of the most adaptable defensive coordinators Ravens have ever had. In fact, I'd say he's second to Ryan probably in that respect. He's up there with Marvin Lewis in terms of a guy who really understood that those are the 3 greatest defensive coordinators the Ravens have ever had.
I will agree with you with the in terms of the middle linebacker play. I think that's what's been destroying this team over the last 4 years, even when Weddle was here. The issues that seem to prop up in the middle of the field. I don't think they've really spent the capital in looking for the right fit and looking for guys who can do dual things. And I think they're starting to realize that what's coming out of the college ranks is not going to change. And no offense to Mr. Clean. I think Mr. Clean is a very athletic linebacker. I think he's a very gifted linebacker. I think he was done a disservice at LSU. He wasn't taught the basics of playing linebacker. And now once you get into the league, everyone is that great athlete. Now you've got to figure out what's going on between the lines and understand what's coming at you 4 seconds before it happens. And let your natural athletic gifts kick in to make those plays over the middle. I hope that this kind of restart defensively with Mike McDonald, with Zach Orr, who probably is going back to super basics because they all need it. And just from stances, from false steps to not having read steps, like we got to go back to before we, get into our drops, and then we can work through that stuff to get to drops. I think spatial awareness is hard to teach back into your mind as a linebacker, but he's athletic enough, hopefully understand that with this new defense and probably a little more zone action that he can play faster and just be himself and not have to worry about if I make a mistake, there's no one to cover me. That's the beautiful part of zone. There's 3 layers. Mm-hmm. There's the rush, There's a linebackers, there's the safety, and there might be someone underneath or someone on top or whatever it might be. So there's plenty of people around you to cover up for a mistake if you want to be aggressive and make plays.
Yeah, I mean, defense still has to play with 11 people, but I agree. You having more people looking at the football is generally a very good thing in terms of zone defense. That's a positive. One of the things I've been kind of critical about Patrick Queen for is not necessarily what he came out of LSU with. And I realize he was in the middle of a great defense, allowed to roam very freely within that defense and play his athleticism. I'm trying to think, there's a linebacker for the Rams, but it's not like he was the only one ever. Isaiah Robertson. Remember him in the 1970s? You guys?
The name sounds familiar, yeah. I've watched enough 80s football to probably have seen that name once or twice.
Okay, he lasted into the 80s for sure.
But Dennard remembers. Dennard's an old guy, so he remembers.
Yeah, I was born in 80. I started watching football around 86, 87. I picked it up. My name is after a corner on the Rams from 1979, so I'm attached.
Very good. All right, no matter what I do, if I bring up anything from the 70s, I get embarrassed. I'm not doing it anymore. Anyway, Isaiah Robertson had the reputation as being someone who was allowed to roam and make big plays within a defense that had an outstanding front four and a great defensive backfield. And, they pretty much had it all, and he was able to roam and do his thing. Patrick Queen needs, at the NFL level, certainly playing for the Baltimore Ravens and in the division they're in, needs to learn how to shed blocks. He needs to learn how to actually follow the running back, in terms of where he's going. He needs to have an idea of what's going on behind him in terms of route combinations. That means learning it off the line of scrimmage. And he needs to be a better tackler. He needs to be a better fundamental wrap-up tackler. That's not everything, by the way, but it's enough for me to say that Patrick Queen needed specific positional coaching that was outside of what the Ravens could give him, not during the season stuff, because I think some of that actually failed. Watching how Rob Ryan and him, the relationship seemed to be working between them in camp. It was not very impressive, and I didn't hear Patrick Queen at any point make effusive statements that I would hope for about Rob Ryan, saying, "Boy, he's got so much to teach me. I'm trying to be like a sponge and pick it up. It's like drinking out of a fire hose." If he just said some things like that, I'd have said, okay, that relationship is probably working. Seeing him, leaning on a tackling donut while the special teams drills are going on when they've got 20 minutes to work together, that's not impressive. That's not what I want to see from my inside linebacker. And Queen himself has to take a portion of the burden here. And frankly, at a crossroads in his career in year 3, where he's playing for his 5th-year option right now, he needs to figure it out and get the positional coaching he needs outside of his time with the Ravens.
Yeah, and I think Zach Orr was brought on more as a personal coach to Mr. Queen to settle him down. And we'll just say this, Zach Orr, if he doesn't get hurt, probably in the top 5 of linebackers, inside linebackers with the Ravens, if he plays his time out here. He fundamentally sound. He was that aggressive at the point of attack. He understood everything that was going around him, and he could take the best of it. I was never worried about Zach Orr.
Good player, good coverage player, understood what was going on at the line of scrimmage, and that was one of his really big things. If you look back at those teams that had Orr, the Pease era, they didn't play a whole lot of dime defense because the dime would have been replacing him.
Yep.
It would have been bringing in another safety to replace him. And
I remember the conversation they were having if they should pull Darryl Smith off the field because they didn't want to pull Orr off the field. Because they were like, we want them all on the field, and they were kind of like, well, he's got the green dot, and I think that's when the transition started happening to have Mosley have it. So, Smith could come off the field and it'd be Mosley and Orr playing.
Yeah, the way Queen plays, it reminds me of something that Harrison Smith, the safety for the Vikings, mentioned, and I think I shared this with Dennard. He was on a podcast. I think it was the Man to Man podcast with Darius Butler and Antoine Bethea. And, he was just talking about safety play, but he got into this point about young players coming into the league. Initially talking about himself and then kind of riffing on, okay, now that I've been in the league a number of years, now that I'm kind of a vet, I've worked with some younger players. And he wasn't just talking about young safeties either. He said, this is just young players on defense in general, with young safeties or even linebackers kind of at that second level. And he said, sometimes he would talk to guys and he'd say, hey, look, like in practice or they're going over something. He's like, look, just don't move. Okay. When the ball's snapped, don't move. And then move.
Didn't move.
He said with these young players, they're flying everywhere because there's so much going on. Formationally, motion shifts, different kinds of things, and their eyes are all over the place. And I think for me, that's kind of one thing that I see with Patrick Queen is I think you listen to him talk and even talk about himself or talk about things even outside the game, let alone what he's talking about in the game. He seems like a frenetic kind of guy. Like his mind's kind of frenetic, everything's moving kind of fast. And I think you see that with his eye discipline on the field. Like he's looking at everything, right? And reacting to everything. And it's like, that point that Harrison Smith made on that podcast always comes back to my mind when I watch that. It's like, hey, sometimes don't move and then move decisively, because you see that one thing that I think we all can probably picture pretty vividly is, a team motioning a tight end across the formation and kind of running that split zone run and coming back the other way, or using that guy on like a play action sort of bootleg play and having him come back out the other side. He's running with that guy, like especially on the run plays, like he's just running out of there. He's running out of the box. He's running out of his gap. He's just chasing that guy across the field. And it's like, hold on. Take a beat to really make sure you understand what you're seeing. What's your key? Are you supposed to be keying that guy? Or are you supposed to be keying something else? Right? So be disciplined with your eyes, be disciplined with your keys, wait, then move decisively. And I think when he got a chance to play a little bit more on the weak side, where he didn't have to necessarily do some of that right away, he was able to kind of slow it down a bit because he's not right there in the A gaps on every play. There were times when he was, but not on every single play. And he doesn't have, maybe some of the communication responsibilities that Bynes might have took on in terms of making adjustments there in the middle. I think he was able to move a little more decisively. And you saw that with his eyes, like he was a little bit more decisive. And I think they were giving him probably a little bit less to handle, just in terms of mentally, in terms of what he needed to process on his plate. Like, hey, like Dennard would tell me all the time, sometimes you got to tear a guy down to build him back up. So maybe we threw a little bit too much on the plate, weren't quite ready for it. Let's take some off the plate. That can seem like a bad thing on its face. People are like, well, wait a minute, this guy's going into year 3. You shouldn't be taking stuff off. But sometimes you got to take stuff off in order to rebuild the confidence and say, let's give you one or two things or a couple things, whatever it is, and get you dialed in, locked in those things. And as you get confident, because you'll make plays, and we saw that with him, as you make plays handling those couple of things, the confidence starts to come back. Now we can add back, right? Now we can go back up to the buffet station and put some more stuff back on the plate because you've got the confidence sort of rebuilt again. But the things that Ken mentioned, those things are all true. Like the tackling for sure. I mean, to me, that's like a real core thing with him. It's like, that's just bad fundamentals and technique. He can improve that if he chooses to be disciplined about it and really, make sure that he's using proper technique, because he can get anywhere. He can get to any play. But once you get there, you're sliding off tackles, you're taking bad angles. That's a choice kind of thing. And then again, with the stuff happening behind you, to me, that's about that discipline part too, like making sure that your eyes are in the right place, that you're not just taking the cheese on the first thing that comes across the field. Can that happen going into this year? I mean, it might be a big ask, but he's got the coaching. Because I think those guys were here when he was a rookie, right? McDonald and Orr, were they both here when he was a rookie?
Orr was gone already.
I think Orr was, yeah.
McDonald might have been his linebacker coach. Was he inside backers coach?
Yeah.
So, maybe those guys can kind of take that approach again to kind of, slowly build it back up. Because look, like you said, athletically, that's the kind of athleticism that you'd like to have on the field. It's like
I think it's important. I think it's important to understand that the fundamental issue that he has, and I would say 85% of his issues would be solved if he had quiet feet.
Where do the quiet feet originate? It's still a processing mental thing. There may be some component of twitchiness, like I can't stop my foot from. You ever had the thing where you kind of put your foot on a chair or something, or put on the seat in front of you or whatever, and you can't stop it from twitching, or it naturally twitches? There might be some component of that physiologically I'm not understanding, but I think basically it's mental. Is that he's not processing quickly enough to be able to keep his feet quiet.
Well, and that's the thing though. He's been. It's so funny. You can watch the first 4 games of the season last year, and he was moving around. He was doing this. He was doing that. He was never set. He was never set and looking at the formation. And once Spines came in, and that next 4 weeks, you saw him able to stop, look, and process before everything got going, because he didn't about communicating with the front 5 at that point. And I think when you play linebacker and you look at Ray, there are shots of Ray Lewis. You can watch him now. When a play starts, his feet are not moving. Why? Because he's still looking and processing the box between the tackles. For him, it would have been the guard and the center. Who's pulling, who's moving. Once that clicks in your brain as a linebacker, now my feet can start to react and my hands can shoot at the same time. When you're not taught that way as a linebacker, and this is why I get on your boy out in San Diego, Mike, with his hands. They're horrible. He's a safety who should have never been moved down to linebacker. And the only reason why he got moved down to linebacker at Oklahoma because he couldn't catch. That's a safety. It's the only reason why he's out there. Anyway, I had to pluck with you.
So unnecessary.
All I'm saying is basic component of linebacker play is quiet feet and quick hands. And if you're not doing that, you are in whole types of problems. And you're never going to fix them. Until you fix your feet, you're never going to fix anything else.
Well, he doesn't have a quiet mind. He doesn't have a quiet mind either. I think the feet could be quieted if the mind was quieted.
And that's why it starts with your base. Because if you're sitting there and not doing anything, you should be processing instead of sitting there, who's doing this, who's playing, who's doing that. Stand still, process the call, understand the formation. They're still getting out of the huddle. Why are you jumping around, looking around, trying to blitz? Process what's going on first, then get set.
Okay, well, let me just say 2 things about what you just said. One is, if all that were true, there is no way in hell you can give the green dot to Patrick Queen. There's no way in hell a guy who can't process, has feet that are all over the place, frenetic, and can have the green dot. The other thing I go back to is Michael's earlier comment, because I think this completely goes to the quiet feet to doing the thing. In the cafeteria of defensive responsibilities, Patrick Queen needs to have a diet conscious first serving, where he can go and have 2 or 3 things are on his plate. And we saw when he had a lot of things to do at the mic, it was much more difficult for him. When he was at the wheel, when he's trailing, he keyed off Bynes very well. He doesn't have to read his keys if he can read Bynes' key a lot. The other thing is, if he's got less things to read, if it's just guard and center, if he's trying to figure out the puller being on the weak side, if he's trying to just figure out how I need to trail this play most effectively, it's much easier than figuring out what's the running back doing, which block am I having to shed, which am I doing all this. I mean, there's so much more at that mic spot that he has to keep track of. But in terms of who's got the green dot in the long run, we could have the debate about whether or not inside linebacker or safety is the appropriate person for it. I think there are reasons why you You can platoon at the position. We could go into that separately. But in terms of this personnel group, I don't think there's a question at all about who has to have the green dot.
I totally agree. I think it has to stay in the secondary because of the personnel. I think you can kind of see, yes, they brought in a lot of undrafted free agent middle linebacker, but they're looking for someone to take control of their job and be there for a while. And see, they brought in kind of different types. That's why I was hoping and praying that Dallas would take the center from Iowa, like literally the pick before, because that would have forced the Ravens to actually address it with Devin Lloyd and not that spot. And then would have kind of already solved 2/3 of the problems that this defense would have had. And you might not even have to, and having Kyle Hamilton, it could have been special. That's all.
Yeah, and it may still slow down. I mean, I know the clock is ticking, as Ken mentioned earlier, from contractual.
Mike Tomlin said that earlier too.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, because Channing Crowder tried to say, "Hey, coach, look, I understand," because Mike Tomlin made the point about, "Hey, I don't run away from coaching; I run to coaching." And there's a lot of guys who don't want to coach, right? They don't want to do what they've been hired to do, because they made. I guess somebody asked him a question about, well, what do you do with players who come in and they struggle with this or they struggle with that, or people say they can't learn? And he sits back and he laughs and he's like, "I love reading draft evals where they talk about anything other than pedigree. Tell me a guy doesn't know, he's inconsistent with how he uses his hands, or he doesn't know how to do this." He's like, "That's my job. That's coaching." Right. But then Channing Crowder said, "But coach, everybody can't play in this league. So when do you know when there's a guy who can't play on this league?" And of course, he gave coaching kind of diplomatic answer where he said, "Look, there's not a cookie cutter answer for that because everybody's different, but the clock is ticking and we all know when it's up. Like we just know, right? You know when it's up." And he's like, "When it's up, there's no debate. There's no discussion. You know it when you see it," right? But all the things that I think we talk about with Patrick Queen, to me, are issues that are coachable. This isn't like a physical thing to me, where he's physically unable to do certain things. And so you say, okay, we can't necessarily have this guy on the field in certain situations, or maybe in a lot of situations. That's a bad way to say it. We couldn't have this guy on the field in a more broad range of situations because he has physical limitations that don't allow him to do the things we need him to do. He doesn't have that. I don't think that they're physical limitations that he has. So that's always the question, though, is, can something be developed? Yeah. Can you coach him to use his hands more consistently? Sure. Can you coach him to quiet his feet? Sure. Can you coach him to be more disciplined with his eyes and his reads? Yeah. Can you help him with that by not taking him to Golden Corral and taking him to a place where there's like single entrees on the
making a one choice menu?
"Quote unquote," air quotes, can do all of those things, but will they translate into what you need to see on the field on a consistent basis? And I think he's made improvement each year. Certainly, I think we saw towards the end of last season. And, I think, Ken, you and I might have talked about this on one of your shows where I said, if he turns out just to be a very good, above average to very good will linebacker, that's fine.
Yep.
That's fine. He doesn't have to become the next CJ Mosley, the next Ray Lewis, the next great, Ravens middle linebacker. He doesn't have to be that. And I think that expectation, when you're a first round pick inside linebacker, that's what the expectation is going to be with this team, is that you were drafted to be the next great middle linebacker.
Well, I think this defense will help him in his pursuit of a second contract.
Agree with that.
Because now he's going to have, as a will linebacker, and I played it in college, there are literally 3 zones you're responsible for: the flat, the hook, the curl. That's all you need to know. Anything else, you're either in man coverage or blitzing. That's it. 5 things. So the fact when he gets into coverage, and he's going to have 3 things he's got to worry about: If I in cover 3, I am most likely hook the curl. If I'm in quarter coverage, I have flats. After that, fire zones, most likely curl the flat. That's going to be his responsibility. Now he can go play football. Everything is condensed. And like the screenshots you sent me earlier or something we were reading about how, some teams name them in terms of, we had a scheme that everything started with the letter of the linebackers that were blitzing, what gap they were going to. So as a call, we would call it base bullets, right? Guess where the linebackers are going? Ain't much thinking. and the linemen know not to touch the B gap, so they know where they're going, right? So now I can be a football player. Now I can look around and say, hey, that looks like a screen. So instead of completely blitzing, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to take that one step, and as soon as you lost it, I'm taking off running, and that's when those big plays happen with the strips from behind, those types of things, because your mind's free. Because guess what? You only got 2 things to think about. I think that's important. I think that's going to help everyone on this team to play faster and not have to worry about if this guy drags and the tackle decides to fall down on the ground and the running back turns right. What's Humphrey going to do if this corner? There was so much going on in the back end. No one knew what was going on because teams decided, you know what? I'm just going to do this in motion, and y'all are never going to figure it out.
Let's go back to the entire period of 19 through 21, because it's a really interesting one in Ravens linebacker history. And in terms of simplification of scheme, to address your point directly, Dennard, do you think that Wink went quickly enough, and I'm going to make this a little more complex question, so this is not the only thing, moved quickly enough to unravel what Queen needed to do to make it simpler for him? And I look back at 19 in particular and how quickly they unraveled the Owasso thing. They gave it to him, no question about it. He green dot, start the season, you're the man. And then, a half in, they took the green dot away from him. 4 games in, he's no longer a starter. He's back to being a platoon will linebacker with a multitude of players, but Young was there for starters, and LJ Ford, and of course Clark was having his big year at the dime that year as well. So those guys were platooning. Queen came in, obviously a number 1 draft pick. So there's a different investment of draft capital. There's a more likelihood that they're going to want to take more time with that. But do you think that they've acted quickly enough under Wink to take responsibilities away from Patrick Queen and make the job as simple as possible? Because he's obviously got a tray of food now in front of him, with the overused metaphor cafeteria, and he needed to have a few less desserts, but also a few less entrees on that tray as well.
I think COVID messed up everything. I think him not having that preseason whole built-in thing, and they're coming off of, they're just throwing him into this defense thinking it's plug and play for him because of where he came from. And they basically, the first 4 games of that season was basically a preseason for everybody, because you had to figure out what guys could and could not do because you haven't seen your guys play. So were they not quick enough to pull stuff? I think they were hoping he would find it.
Hope is a great strategy when it's your only strategy.
Yeah.
But
they didn't have anyone else.
Well, they did. They had platoon options where they could have used more safeties in. They could have had him off the field on every 3rd down, every obvious passing down. They had such. I think they had Chris Board around. It could have replaced him under certain circumstances.
No.
He's not a Chris Board fan.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I'm not that much of a Chris fan either.
sorry. Oh,
But the,
that name makes my skin crawl sometimes.
a lot of the same problems in terms of not understanding what's going on behind him.
Yeah.
That Patrick Queen has. But the other the other option would have been to bring in a large safety and play more when the pass defense is totally breaking down, and it's the responsibility of your middle linebacker is the guy's getting picked on more than anybody. You bring in a Tony Jefferson type to take that role on third down, and they're available on the street. In fact, he was available on the street.
Yeah, I think they had flashbacks when it may have been the playoff run of 19 when Chuck Clark was playing a lot of dime linebacker. It may have been during the regular season, and teams were just running at him, and they were picking up 4 or 5 yards a chunk on. I want to say like Green Bay game and something like that. They were just running down their throat.
In the game at Buffalo, which is the poster child for exactly what you're talking about in terms of Wink making the right choices. Okay, the Ravens played 29 dime snaps that game. 9 of them Buffalo ran, and they ran for over 9 yards a carry on those runs. It was like 87 yards on 9 carries. It was 9.3, 9.7. It was one of those two in terms of the yards per carry. On the 20 pass plays, they had 7 net yards. So 0.4 yards per play. So, yes, you give up something at this to run, and please try not to give me just information about them running at somebody for 5 yards a play when they're holding people to basically 0 in terms of passing by having Clark in there. Clark had that.
Here's the counter to that. It was 50-mile-an-hour winds. So why the hell are you in dime and someone running against you? That's where I have my problems with Wink. Is I understand you're trying to protect yourself against the pass, but you're unwilling to see the totality of what you are doing. And what's going to happen in the fourth quarter is what happened to this defense every game against a top-notch quarterback is they just sat there and literally picked them apart in the fourth quarter, checking the plays, because by that time, all the tricks were open. All the bags were played. And you could get Wink in a formation. You knew who he was going to call, and you can get a first down whenever you felt like it. And you watched this on a consistent basis for years.
The 21 team had all sorts of problems.
I don't even – 2021 is a disaster.
I think it would be a absurdly unfair mischaracterization to say that the 19 and 20 teams, that accurately reflects what good quarterbacks did to the Ravens. The Ravens destroyed every quarterback they faced. The only 2 quarterbacks who even won games against them were week 3 and 4. One was Mahomes, and the other one was the Browns game where they had a very effective game running against the Ravens in the Owasso finale, as I call it. Mm-hmm. The rest of the season, I mean, they dominated every team they played before Tennessee, and that included a lot of good quarterbacks. So I'm Brady, looked terrible against the Ravens. I think that'd be a very unfair mischaracterization in terms of saying that any good quarterback could just have their way with that Ravens team. And in 20 they were a little bit less good on offense. It made them a little bit less dangerous on defense. There's no two ways about it. And then in 21 they were a lot less good on offense. And it made them a lot less good on defense.
Absolutely.
About how soon do you start to take stuff off his plate? I mean, if you think about it, they waited a year. Mm-hmm. A year and a handful of games, right? Because they started to take stuff off his plate in 21. So the plate was full in 20. He was a rookie, first round pick. Obviously, there are expectations around performance, around playing time, all kinds of things that go along with that. And yeah, he had the COVID impacted off season where he basically didn't have much of an off season. And I think Dennard is right. I mean, I think they used the first handful of games of that season to basically, obviously the games counted. They counted in the win and loss columns. They weren't treating them like preseason, but in terms of guys kind of getting their legs under them and seeing what you had from your rookies. But then I'd say you probably would know this better than me, Ken, when they really started to kind of substitute for Queen on passing downs, or maybe it was specifically on third down. I don't know. That happened in 21, right? At some point midway through 21. So, I mean, I think they gave it a year, maybe a year and a half. And they said, all right, this is not getting us the results that we're looking for here. And so we're gonna adjust.
Is that a long period or a short period? Because Owasso, I mean, it was a half to take the green dot away from him. It was 4 games to take the position away from him.
It's all relative. It's all relative.
Right.
I think for Peanut, I guess it's all relative.
But can we truly blame Peanut for what happened in Cleveland because of the issues that were going on outside linebacker? Can we? I know I don't like Peanut, but there were some serious problems at outside linebacker in 2019 to start that season.
It wasn't just Cleveland, though. It wasn't just the Browns game.
That Kansas City game was my goodness.
Had some issues in some of those earlier games too. But like Ken mentioned, I think that the approach of using him and Kenny Young, and we can kind of cobble something together to replace CJ. It just didn't work, and they admitted that relatively quickly by going out and getting Bynes and going out and getting LJ Ford. They at least acknowledged it. And tried to make the best of what they could, what was available to them. So yeah, relative to that, I see your point, Ken. I didn't think about that. Relative to that, it was a longer period of time because they recognized pretty quickly with Peanut and Kenny Young that this was not going to work. But maybe they didn't see the same level of desperation in 2020 and at least part of 2021 that apparently they saw some level of maybe desperation is the wrong word, but they saw some level of need to change in 2021 because they made the change.
Was that because of Harbaugh and not because of Wink? Now, because Harbaugh made a particular comment, and said we shouldn't be going to the well like that too many times. And we also, I want to say that coincided with Queen not playing on passing downs much more after that.
Well, I think he didn't like that cover zero well.
Against Chicago.
In that particular game, he might have felt like maybe we went to cover zero a little, maybe one time too many in that situation, which was rare for her. I mean, that's about the most you'll hear in terms of Harb's speaking out against the coordinator. That's about as far as he'll go publicly. So that did say something. But anyway, yeah, no, that's a good point. Ken makes a good point. I didn't think about that in comparison to Peanut's time. So maybe I was building something that I couldn't support there. Maybe
I want to say this because it really shows you how much I trust Michael as a confidant in terms of what I write and what I talk about. But after that game against Kansas City, third week of 2020. I guess it was, right? Mm-hmm. Third week of 2020, they got reamed over by Mahomes in terms of that game, and it was a lot of it was Queen, and Queen had 5 individual instances where another Ravens player emoted to him on the field, made some sort of a physical gesture indicating his dissatisfaction with what had happened to Queen. And the reason I wanted to share this with Mike before I even released it was like, I'm misinterpreting this. I'm seeing, players who are, very unhappy, and they range in different ways. People emote in different ways. If it's LJ Fort, he knows how to control it. He kind of gives Queen a low 5 as he's telling him something after a bad play. Now, there's no reason for a high 5 or even a low 5 after a bad play unless it comes with some information. About what didn't happen on that play. You're not good. Get up high. But Marlon Humphrey is unreserved about his unhappiness with Queen's play, and he comes up to him and he cocks his head at him, and then words come out of his mouth. I can't read that, but I know they're not happy thoughts. If he's talking to him with his head cocked like that after a bad play, that's a bad thing. So after we saw that, I thought changes could have come even more rapidly with Patrick Queen in terms of how they would shut down certain responsibilities. And, a lot of defenses getting to 3rd and 8. There's a whole hell of a lot of defenses getting off the field on 3rd and 8, or even 2nd and 10. Same kind of thing. You can get them off on that down as well. And they took their time, really trying to make the Patrick Queen pick work. To me, once you've made the mistake on the pick, and you guys, you were on the show, Michael. I wanted Xavier McKinney. was my guy.
I was there to witness it.
Yep. So I could not hide my dissatisfaction. I'm sorry
know.
about that, but it was
I
what
know
it
you're
was.
talking about emoting.
Yeah, there you go.
It was.
I'll shut
There
up.
was now Peters especially. That was the guy that I would always see, and Marcus. That might not be out of character for Marcus to kind of let somebody know he's not happy with what just happened, but I would see him where he's like in like mini tantrum mode, like jumping up and down. Patrick Queen doesn't.
I
do
remember
something.
that play.
Yeah, or is it where he did it in the Patriots game for one, for sure. I remember it in that Sunday night in the monsoon game in 2020. He was on him about something.
It was the last play of the game. They told him the curl, stay in the curl, stay in the curl. And it was like 3rd and 4. And sure enough, they high-load him, and guess where he jumped? Jumped forward, and they threw it right behind him. And Peters was, Peters came flying and was like,
he was hot. He was hot. So I should just say this, because I know for people that are listening or who will go back and listen to this, they'll get into this period and they'll be like, these guys hate Patrick Queen. I don't think anybody here hates Patrick Queen. I think we have different degrees of maybe some dissatisfaction with kind of how things have gone up to this point. I admit I'm biased. Ken, like you mentioned, I was there on the show with you. I liked the pick. I wanted him to be the pick. I still like the player. I still like the person. I'm still holding out hope that, this is probably an unfair characterization because it's probably not accurate. I was going to say, I think he's been a good young linebacker. People will probably say, nah, he hasn't been good. He's probably been average to maybe below average. So that's some of my bias showing. But I think that he can be a good player in this defense. And I'm really hoping that with this change in, maybe how they approach some things, maybe how they do some things, having Mike McDonald back can help him kind of get to that level that I think we all hope that he gets to. So I do want to say that, because I don't want people to think that, we don't think that this guy is any good and he can never be any good. If the ship has sailed in terms of like picking up his option, we'll see. It's probably pretty close to it, but we'll see. I think this year, a good year, could maybe shine a different light on that. But we started. It's probably my fault. I probably started about talking about Patrick Queen in some way, but we're on the green dot, and then we got off on this part of it. But I guess I'm trying to kind of bring us back a little bit. But I guess part of that is because we didn't have much of a disagreement from when we kind of went down that path. That hey, based on personnel, it's probably got to be Chuck Clark. But here's the interesting thing. Here's an interesting part. We've all probably either thought about this or talked about this. Ken, you probably have on one of your shows, is the hypothetical. What if Chuck Clark is not here? What if they move Chuck Clark? I'm not advocating for that one way or the other. I don't want to see him go. I hope he's here. I want him to be here. But if they do move him, who do you think it goes to then?
Well, I think it goes to Hamilton pretty clearly. He would be in there as a strong safety. He'd be playing 100% of the snaps. They'd move him around some. It's interesting. In talking about the history of who's had the green dot, when Clark did sit out a game, who got the green dot? It wasn't a Mike linebacker game. It was Geno Stone. And so they have other guys they trust.
Was that the Colts game?
I don't remember which game it was, honestly. It was a 21 game.
Huh.
So he had the green dot for one game.
I just saw it recently. Packers. He didn't play a Packers game. Yeah, I think it's
interesting.
Anyway, Geno Stone was the guy. So, they trust him, and he's a back end guy, really. He's more of a guy who's likely to be far from the line of scrimmage after a play as opposed to a free safety and whatnot. So, they talked about it up front. They weren't going to say who was going to get it before they announced it during the game. I don't know that that's any kind of a competitive advantage thing. It might be from Harbaugh's perspective. You might think there's some scheme they could do to throw Geno Stone off, but I think it was more a case of they didn't really want to talk about it too publicly as to why it wasn't Queen or why it wasn't Bynes or why it wasn't Stevens, say, who was.
I don't think they wanted people to know that Stone was going to be on the field for 90% of it. But for me, I think it might be Marcus Williams if Clark is not. If you're going to keep it in the secondary, I think you can't give it the corners.
Mm-hmm.
and you don't trust anybody on there. I think Kyle Hamilton will have too much on his plate as a rookie. I got to lean on the guy I just paid $40+ million to say, listen, I need you to come in here and set the tone and be the smart guy back here. This is a brand new defense. It's not like you're coming in here and having learned what we did. So I think that's why a person like Marcus Williams can come in and be a little more assertive as a first-year guy.
In a business environment where I know, who the other person is, I know I'm going to see them every day, and my first question you would be, what is the top end of your willingness for risk on that claim? Because I'll take all of your action. In your case, Dennard, I'll just make it be a beer. I'll say Hamilton gets it for sure over Williams.
But you know what? I wonder, that does make it raises an interesting point. This is I'm just throwing this out just, for purposes of the discussion. I don't know that anybody here has the answer. I wonder how many rookies have had the green dot on defense. You might know this answer for the Ravens, Ken. In the Ravens.
Josh Bynes for 2 games in 2012. Turner and Lewis did not have it. Turner obviously wasn't a rookie at that point. Mosley had it in his 6th game. So he took it over in that game where Flacco had the 5 early touchdown passes against Tampa.
Okay.
That is pretty much it. Clark had not played a lot by the time he got it, but he certainly wasn't a rookie.
Yeah.
Right. He'd been around the system for 2+ years to that point.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to think about it, that angle on it, because you're coming in and you're learning the defense. And like you said, it's going to be new to him. Some of the guys who were maybe here back in 19, there's going to be some carryover elements. I mean, I don't think it's going to be like completely, totally, from the foundation, we're taking this thing down to the studs. There will probably be some stuff that they might have, even if it's terminology, there might have been, some stuff from 2019, the guys who were here that McDonald may bring back. But for Kyle, it's all going to be new. And he's juggling that with all of the other parts of being a professional. And I don't know if you guys have listened to his podcast. He does a podcast with 3 of his teammates from Notre Dame. I think one of them transferred to Georgia Tech recently. This is actually a pretty good podcast. But he talked about that, one of the most recent ones. I think somebody tweeted out maybe a couple clips from it. Might have been Jonas. I think it might have been Jonas Schaefer. But they were asking him, hey, what's this like? What's the transition been like, going into the NFL as a rookie? He started all the way back from draft night up until what like these OTAs and mini camps has been. And he said, it's just you're learning the level of nuance is deeper than it was in college. He said there are things that we're learning now that we didn't even talk about in college. He gave an example like if you're the nickel, whether you're playing outside leverage or inside leverage, and what both of those mean for the rest of the coverage.
That's
about that. Yeah,
that's interesting in itself in college. They don't teach that anymore. That was like when I was playing college football. That was one-on-one. Let's talk about inside and outside leverage and how we line up. Like they don't even. It's big business, and so they're not coaching them anymore. Yeah, I'm sorry for that quick rant.
And you say that Mike McDonald specifically talked to him about 6 inches in the NFL is open. It's different than what you're used to in college, and how important it is to, not disclose the shell that you're in. He's like, if you show NFL quarterbacks what coverage shell you're in, they will eat you apart. So you can't show them pre-snap, or you got to show them one thing and change it up, or show them what looks like the same thing every time and then change it. But you cannot show them pre-snap what it is. So he's just explaining to these guys, and they're just like, okay, yeah, some of this stuff we talked about in college, because they say, hey, we're not trying to make it sound like you don't get good coaching in college. You do, but this is another level in terms of the nuance that they're talking about at the NFL. And he admitted, he said, hey, early on, my head was kind of swimming a little bit. There was a lot coming at me, and I was making some mistakes, but he said, I'm picking things up and trying not to make the same mistake twice. And I think we heard Chris Hewitt say that. He's a guy who doesn't make the same mistake twice. So yeah, mentally, from everything that you hear about him, it doesn't hurt that he's a Mensa member. Mentally, he can probably handle this. But yeah, it'll be interesting for me to see a guy, if that happens. Like I said, I hope that Chuck is here. Certainly, but if that were to happen, and if Kyle were to get it, that would be interesting to see a rookie out there having to call this defense. Obviously, he's going to have help. It's not like he's going to be out there alone. He's going to have some veteran guys around him who can help with different parts of that. And I think, Dennard, you can speak to that too. I mean, I think sometimes people forget about that with defenses. Yeah, one guy might have the helmet communication, but there's multiple guys out there that have responsibilities. Certain guys are calling out strength of formation. Certain guys are calling out run force. Some guys are calling out, whether you got a second tight end in, who's the Y, who's the U. Like different people on the defense have different responsibilities. It's not just the guy with the helmet communication calling out all of it. So
I know defensive coordinators, and I think there was a pushback, a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, when they first started putting radio headsets into the defensive side of the ball, because they've been doing it for the offense for a long time, and they wanted two for that particular reason. One for the linebacker and one for the secondary. So you can check the secondary coverage and you can check the fronts. And the offensive coaches are probably like, oh, no. Oh, no. You don't get two.
Well, you got your guys.
Would change everything. It would literally change everything, because you can communicate the fronts to what you see in formations instantaneously. And you can call slants. You can check to basic stuff. You could do so much more. And offensive football would die instantaneously.
They don't want that in the NFL or college. They don't want that either. They want offensive football as much as we love defensive football. We understand.
We would see a lot of 13 to 10 games. A lot.
What gets viewers and what sells tickets. We get that.
It'd be back to those days where Goose will walk into the offensive coordinators, or vice versa, whatever it was. They say, I only need 13 points this week. You only need 13 points? Yeah, we good. All we need. So, those. I wish they would have more communication on the field. I wouldn't even be surprised if they get them to the wide receivers at some point. Just make the game go faster. But, that'd be a different thing.
Don't they have enough advantages? Do we need any more for the offense?
Yeah.
Please.
I'm a big how the game is played guy, and I think that baseball has really screwed it up.
Yes, they have.
In terms of not encouraging more batted balls, and home runs and strikeouts are very bad for the game. Walks, I think, are tremendous for the game. They add a ton of drama to the game, the manipulation of the pitch count as you go through, but it has to be accompanied by high probabilities of batted balls and getting your fielders involved and having that part of the game be exciting. And also, it really has cut down on the variation of philosophy that's possible to play the game. And I don't want that. I want what the Ravens did to the NFL in 2019 to happen more regularly, that somebody figures out the new key. And they say, hey, if everybody's zigging, we're going to zag. And we see a lot of value here that's unfound.
Absolutely.
I learned about this recently. This is you talked about references, Ken, to the 70s. This one's even further back. This is like the 50s. But I've been reading this book by Steve Owen, Giants coach back in that day. I think he coached the Giants from like the 1938 to maybe like 1950 or something.
Okay.
But he played in the Iron Man area, right? The one platoon era, where he said basically if you had one sub a game, essentially, if you subbed a guy out in the first half, that was it. He's done for the game. You couldn't go out and come back in another half. And this was when guys were playing both ways, and before they went to the two platoon system. So that's when he played in, and he coached, a little bit later. Some of that stuff had changed around. And he talked about the three rules that really changed the game for the offense. He said it really became like the explosion of offensive football. He said one was not spotting the ball. At their time, it was 10 yards from the sideline. I think it ended up moving even further, like 15 yards or 20 yards. But before, like they showed a picture, they literally would spot the ball. Like if it ended up on the sideline, we spot it right here.
Yeah,
like
you had to run your first down play to get back to the middle of the field.
Yeah. He said they'd waste the play. You basically got to waste the play to get back to the middle field. So that was one thing. They changed that. And then the forward pass, you had to be 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage before you could throw a 5-yard pass. I mean, a forward pass, excuse me. Had to be 5. So he said they changed that. So now you could be anywhere. As long as you were behind the line of scrimmage, you could throw a pass from anywhere, right? So the ball's coming out quicker. People are more encouraged to throw the ball down the field. And the other one I guess I didn't fully understand. He said they moved the goalposts back to the front of the end zone, which made field goals easier. I guess they had moved them back at some point, and then they moved them back up to the front of the end zones. And then, of course, we know they moved it back again now.
That's interesting.
But I guess back then, moving them to the back of the end zone, obviously guys weren't as accurate as they are now in terms of kicking field goals. It apparently made it a lot harder back during that time, so they moved it up to the front. And he said those three things caused an explosion in offensive football. And he was a defensive guy. He was a defensive coach. People might know some of his. He coached Tom Landry and Otto Schnellenbacher. And so I'm not going to pretend like I know Tom Landry. I'm not going to pretend like I know some of these other guys. I just read the names. But is it really
Schnellenberger? Howard Schnellenberger?
Howard Schnellenberger. This is Otto Schnellenbacher. Howard Schnellenberger. Tuffy Lehmans. There's some great names in this book. It's interesting to hear him talk about things in the 40s and 50s from an aerial attack. He's talking about how they had to play the Browns when they first came into the NFL from the AAFL, and Otto Graham and Dante Lavelli and Max Speedy, they're ripping the league up, and they're throwing the ball all over the place. And he kind of implemented what they called the umbrella defense, what essentially became the 4-3, because he said prior to that, almost everybody played with three guys in coverage. That was it.
Yes.
Nobody played with a fourth guy.
Even I'll risk myself on the 1970s thing again here, but in the 1970s game pay dirt, the standard defense A is the 4-4-3. No. So it's very much a single safety, two corner league where very few teams are doing anything but 12 or 21 in terms of personnel. Most teams are 21.
And then he started the multiple front, because he said in that game, the Browns literally hadn't lost. They hadn't lost a game in like 3 years. They've been in the AAF and they ran through that league, won a couple championships, came into the NFL, and I don't think they lost their first few games or first handful of games in the NFL, and they had to play them. And back then you couldn't trade. He called them movies. We call it film now, tape. But he said football movies on the other team. And you couldn't get it unless you had played the opposing team. If you hadn't played them, you couldn't get any film of them. So they hadn't played the Browns yet, so they didn't have any film. So they had to send a scout. This is old, like Steve Belichick, right? Like Bill's dad, like go in person and scout these guys. And he saw what they were doing, and he said, "Hey, we got to deal with this passing game, man. Up to that point, they had been playing with three guys in coverage, like almost everybody else. He's like, we got to do something. This is a serious problem." So he said, "I want to have a way to get an extra guy back in coverage, because if we got 4 as opposed to 3, that's going to help us out." And he said, I want to be able to change up the front. I want to be able to bring pressure. And other times I want to be able to show pressure, but then drop guys out. So he said, I want to line up in a base 6-1, right? I want 6 guys on the line of scrimmage. And then he didn't call it a linebacker. He called it a backer up. I want to have the backer up. He's the one guy. But then I also want to be able to go to like a 5-2 something and then a 5. I forget. He basically wanted to play 3 different fronts, but he wanted them all to kind of start out in the 6-1, and then they could drop out the ends. And now you got 6 guys in coverage, or you could rush the ends. So he's doing this in the 50s. This is like multiple front defense, almost a very early sort of zone blitz, type philosophy, very early. But
sounds a little bit 46 in there. You throw in monster.
I've been tweeting out like some pages. I see certain parts that I think are kind of interesting, so I've been sharing that. And somebody asked me today, they were like, "Why are you reading this stuff from?" I think it was Dave. I think Dave was like, "Why are you reading this stuff from
cool
40s and 50s?" It's cool. And I told him, I think sometimes you got to look back to look forward. There's nothing new in football. And he talked about that. Steve Owen says, look, there's 10 plays. There's 10 core plays in football. Everything else is variation. That's it. So he's like, if you've got those 10 things and you can do them well, and it starts with players, he said, look, we can talk about schemes, and there's the T formation and the T with the man in motion and all these great things. But each one of those had a player, whether it was Red Grange or whether it was this guy or that, they had a player. So he's like, people say, well, these schemes came in and revolutionized the game. Well, he said, I argue those players made those schemes. So it's a very interesting book. I don't know why I brought it up at this point in the show, probably because we're towards the end of the show. But I think it's just that thought that everything that's old is new again. And, I think some of the stuff that we hear about Mike Macdonald's defense about, hey, we're going to play more zone, we're going to play more match coverage in zone. We're probably going to, more sim pressure stuff where we're going to show pressure and then maybe back out of it. None of that stuff's new. It's been happening, been throughout football. But we'll get to see Mike Macdonald's spin on it and his take on it.
Yeah. The modern spin they all been talking about. So yeah. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I've been drooling about this for years to go back to the 4-3. Well, a version.
That's another thing.
And have more flexibility in coverage. Yes.
Another show.
He's not a Wink. He's not a Wink fan. He's not a Chris fan, and he's not an Anthony Averett fan. So he got his wish with all three of those.
I got all three. You know what?
Believe me, I had to hear about this all season long about those guys in one capacity or another.
Oh boy,
his feelings.
Well, Chris Board deserved it. He deserved all the hate he got for the way he played in 2021.
Hey, I wish Chris and Anthony nothing but success as they move forward. Same thing for Wink. Thank them for what they did while they were here. I enjoyed watching them. That's all I'm going to say about those guys.
We get to see McDonald this year. It's like opening a new set of Christmas presents, is what I've said on my show several times in terms of what he'll bring, because we won't see any of it in the preseason. We won't see any clue of it. He'll be going on matchups, trying to find out what players' strengths really are in terms of the plays. Whatever he's doing, it won't be what we'll see on opening day, right? And I guess the Jets. And then we're going to see a whole bunch of different stuff that we've never seen before, and we're going to be like, "Oh my God, look what he's doing!"
That's a
lot of fun.
Zach Wilson. Oh my God, look at that.
Ken, you bring up a very good point, and I was thinking about this earlier before the show. People are going to be so fired up about how bad defensively they're going to play inside of the red zone. And the reason why I'm going to tell you this is because you cannot give away how you're going to play the red zone if you are a 4-3 team. You can't put it on tape a lot because it's its own separate package. Once the rules kind of change for 4-3, once you get inside, they'll probably move it up to the 25 or the 30 because teams go for the end zone from there. But the rules will change dramatically, and that in itself will be its own probably 2 or 3 days at training camp. Just red zone. And I guarantee the press will not be allowed to be there. This will be after training camp is over. You're on mute.
Sorry, it happens once per week on my show, or once per show, I should say. But I agree with you in terms of that comment. I don't think they're going to a 4-3 this year because the personnel is not there to really support that. But it could be something they gradually move to over time. And if we see, in particular, with a player like Ajabo, that he becomes a central part of their edge rush scheme, then the next draftee may allow them to make the move. Certainly, that's the other guy who can play that other end position is the key for the Ravens in terms of whether or not they can actually move to a 4-3. Yeah, they got to have the right interior guys, but it's
you need a Hayes or a Bowser to step up, or Owe to step up to be the Michael Strahan of the 4-man front, because you can have quote unquote kind of the sack dude in Ajabo. Like you need that guy who can just go get it. You need a guy like a Michael Strahan who can play the run, who can be by himself one-on-one and beat a Pro Bowl left tackle by himself.
Trail Suggs.
Yes. That's what you need. You need somebody like that, and it changes everything.
And all we need is draft a Hall of Famer, and we're fine.
Yeah. Or at least give me, what is it, the 80-20 rule? Give me 80% of that. Give me a very good player who gives me, I don't even want sacks. I want disruption. I want chaos. That's what I need out of my front four. I don't need a bunch of sacks. I don't care if we're 32nd in the league. What I want to be is number one in turnovers.
Just draft Hall of Famers. That's all you got to
do. Hey, we did it first early. Why can't we do it again?
that is another sign that we probably need to think about landing this play. That we can get into a whole nother show about 4-3 versus 3-4. And me and Dennard did that at least twice during the regular season because I think we both kind of came to an agreement on it where we're like, look, they're going to be multiple. That's who they've been. They're going to continue to be that. Whether they play a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that, that's going to depend week to week, matchup, situation. But they're going to be multiple. And that sometimes people can get a little overly wrapped up in those designations. They're not as static as people think they are. They haven't been for a long time. That's not really.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I think going by a 4-man front and 3 down linemen and 4 down linemen is probably a better way to speak of it going forward, in a sense.
Yeah, that, or if you want to get super nerdy, you can get into spacing,
yes,
even spacing, odd spacing. We can get all kind of nerdy.
Odd, even, true,
yeah,
tight, whatever over unders.
Because we've been going on with this.
Yes,
and, I know we tend to have these super long shows, but Ken's got stuff to do, places.
Yeah.
So, I want to thank you, and I want to give you the floor. We like to kind of do this, Ken, as we go around. Give you another opportunity. Anything else that you want to say with regard to this topic? Obviously, well, let me get the plugs in real quick for all the Ken shows. If you don't know, I suppose you're under a rock somewhere if you're a Ravens fan, but I'd say you probably put out a podcast a day or somewhere around that. I mean, they come out pretty regularly. All kinds of topics, all kinds of guests. You can go on to the Film Study Baltimore website. There's all kinds of projects and research and studies that I know you've had guys, do some things for you on there. So there's different things you can find there. You can obviously find links to the podcast. Obviously, the podcast Film Study is available on whatever you listen to your podcast on. And look, when the season starts, maybe I shouldn't say this. I hope you'll be doing the articles, maybe. I think you'll probably be doing the articles still, but I know you got a ton of stuff going on. But I just wanted to plug all of that, and then if I left anything out, forgive me. You can add that in. But yeah, sort of final words as we close out this episode.
Much appreciated, Michael. Great being on with you guys. Just always terrific to talk football. I had no idea. I'm just looking up, and we're an hour and a half here, and I had no idea I've been that long. But great stuff. Michael, always appreciate talking to you. You'll be a guest, no doubt, on some offense and defense shows this year. Dennard, love to have you on for some content of various sorts. This is a great debate. Defensive philosophy is something I really love to do, and you're a fun guy to do it with. So
yeah, really I enjoy it. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love breaking it down all the way down to line stunts and down and distance and even fourth quarter and there's so many different ways and different things to attack in terms of scheme and everything sort. But I want to thank you, Ken, very much for coming on today. I know short notice and we talked about a whole bunch of things, but I really appreciate you coming on tonight and being yourself. And it's really appreciative.
Anytime, guys.
Yeah. Just to wrap up, that green dot will stay in the secondary this year, unless lightning struck and Queen is ready. But at the end of the day, I'm excited to see where all this goes. I'm excited to see how all this plays out and to see this defense grow, because what we see in week 1 will be completely different in week 8.
Yeah, it's exciting. Look, I won't take too much more time because we're wrapping everything up. But hey, just want to let everybody know that, as usual, we've been streaming these live. It's been on the Deep Cover YouTube channel. I think it's been going through my Twitter account, going through Dennard, the FireZone Show Twitter account. Obviously, once we finish these, they're typically available like immediately after or like a couple of minutes after. So people can go back and rewatch. Of course, we'll tweet those out and share links to those so people can kind of do that at their leisure when they want to listen. But yeah, it's going to be exciting, man. We'll get to do another season talking about defense, and we got something new to talk about. We got a new defense coordinator, new scheme, new concepts coming in, new players, of course, with rookies and other acquisitions to the team. So new stuff. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. I look forward to it. We still got several more weeks to go before training camp, but it'll be here before you know it. And once training camp hits, that snowball is rolling downhill for the rest of the season.
Can I have a snowball?
It relents for no one. It stops for no man. So, it's going to be fun. So, hey, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. For those who tuned in to the live show, appreciate the comments. Shout out to Huddle Up Films, Jason out there. He dropped a couple comments in for us. And for anybody who listens to this, on rewatch, you can always hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Abukari. Of course, Dennard at the FireZone Show. Ken at Film Study Ravens on Twitter. I think we all like to engage with people and try to as much as we can. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good night. Be good to each other out there, and see you next time.